And welcome to the 51st episode of Rising Tide, the Ocean Podcast. And today we're talking about our 20th anniversary at Blue Frontier.
And wow, I can't believe it's been 20 years. This is the Rising Tide co-host, Vicki Nichols-Goldstein, and I'm going to take a leadership role here because I came on the board of directors of the the Blue Frontiers campaign 20 years ago as a founding board member. And I have seen amazing growth of this organization and have seen all of the wonderful accomplishments. So we're going to have a chance to talk about that today. So David, back around 2002, you wrote a book that really launched this whole initiative. Tell us about the book and what inspired you.
Sure, I've always led my life as in a schizophrenic manner. As a journalist, I covered wars and politics and the border, but always wanting to go home to go body surfing and diving. So I left TV and wrote my first book, The War Against the Greens, in 1994. And since then, I'd wanted to write another book on the ocean, which I finally got to at the beginning of the century. It's called Blue Frontier, Saving America's Living Seas. And right after it came out, I got a call from Ralph Nader, who'd read it and was very interested in the last chapter called The Seaweed Rebellion. It's about all the grassroots folks who have solutions, but how do we scale them up? So I was considering at that time, I just lost my life's partner and dive adventure buddy, Nancy Lodansky. I was thinking of going off to war. That's when President Bush was ginning up the invasion of Iraq, and I felt like I knew that war was a good antidote to depression. I'd done it before. But Ralph was suggesting that we form an organization to link all these grassroots activists, these seaweed rebels, as I call them. And I thought we'll always have wars. We may not always have healthy reefs or kelp forests. And so I spoke to a number of, activists and fishing groups and ocean businesses that were dependent on healthy seas and decided to launch it, which we did in 2002. And one of the first things we did was create a book, the Ocean Conservation Guide, that became a website, the Blue Movement Directory, identifying about 2,000 activist groups and marine parks and laboratories and the like that over the next 20 years we tried to link together in the Blue Movement.
And Blue Frontiers, we guys, all of us who've been working in this arena with you, are really known for the Blue Vision Summits. And your first Blue Vision Summit was in 2004, and you've had a total of 6 of those. And I think I've been to 5. Those summits are fantastic. So tell us about that very first one and what the reception was and what your goals were for these summits.
Sure. I mean, in our first active year, 2003, we had strategy meetings with activists in California and the Mid-Atlantic. We had a founding dinner at the Carnegie Institution in D.C. with 150 friends, including members of Congress. And Sam Farr, who was a member of Congress, said, that this is the beginning of a seaweed revolution, which has a better name, Blue Frontier. And he talked about Congress wasn't aware of what was happening in the ocean. And, we thought we had to bring all these grassroots people together and bring them to the policymakers and let them know that they represented millions of people across the nation, from sea to shining sea, as it were, that valued what healthy oceans had to offer. So in 2004, we did organize this first summit. It was 250 folks who, on their own dime and on their own time, came to DC for 4 days. There were 250 folks representing 160 grassroots organizations. Our keynote speaker was Peter Benchley, who had written Jaws, and I'd heard he was really a shark and marine conservationist. So he and Wendy were there, and that's one reason Wendy's on our chat today. And he kind of got the whole thing rolling along with Sam Farr and others. He talked about, as a youth in Nantucket, how every time he went fishing or went in the water, there were sharks, and that was part of the natural environment. And years later, he saw they were gone, and his fascination not only led to his book, but his book led to a lifetime partnership with Wendy, kind of identifying and working on marine conservation and conserving sharks. And anyway, Wendy, you were there.
Peter was very complimented to be asked to be a speaker at a group of activists like this, and Sam Farr and other people from Congress participating, because after Jaws, we really went full time into ocean conservation and understanding what was going on around the world. We did expeditions with National Geographic and other groups. And I think Peter, he did a lot of research for the book Jaws, but as we learned in the next 5 or 6 years, we saw what was happening to the ocean and how much we were polluting it and overfishing it. And so that turned our life into a full conservation mode. So it was great for him to go and speak. And he did many other speeches about the ocean and wrote other books and lots of articles. So we've been associated with Blue Frontier, and I've been associated ever since then on the board. And I just think that grassroots groups are terribly important to get their energy into the ocean and help us make some progress here. So Wendy, with the Benchley Awards, tell me what your goals were with that, because that went on for 10 years, and it was pretty special. Yes, it was special. Well, David, Blue Frontier, and Peter and I, not Peter, but Peter was deceased then, and we had always felt that that there were so many different kinds of people working on ocean issues, whether they were politicians or grassroots groups or the media, photography, Margo, all kinds of people really in there, and that we wanted to bring people from many different venues together and honor them. So that was the idea for the Benchley Awards, and it was really exciting that the ocean community loved them and felt that they were the Academy Awards of the ocean. I had the honor of being at many of them, and they were elegant, beautiful, and really special to have these high-level decision makers or filmmakers, grassroots activists come in, and it just shone a beautiful light on what's happening in the world of ocean conservation and protection.
And I think the 78 winners that were given our Manta Awards over that decade create a real network of leadership from many sectors. And so in that sense, that's also the Blue Frontier mission is to bring these different sectors together so we can strengthen our movement for healthy seas.
And yes, and that movement is continuing to grow. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because we have Margo Pellegrino on the line, or part of our podcast today. And she was part of the Ocean Explorers Project. And Margo, you came on board around 2007. Is that right?
Yes, 2007 with that first trip from Miami to Maine.
Yeah, and you're a paddler, and you wanted to raise awareness as to what was happening in the ocean. So tell us, how do you raise awareness by paddling the entire coastline on the East Coast?
Well, fortunately, I had a lot of wonderful partners in the East Coast chapters of Surfrider Foundation and National Environmental Trust at the time. And none of this, I have to tell you, none of this could really have happened at all without that grassroots level of organizing. And NET was pretty instrumental with the press, but none of this, none of the grassroots really would have happened in the way that they did happen if it weren't for Blue Frontier's Ocean and Coastal Conservation Guidebook, which was absolutely instrumental. And it makes it so easy to organize any kind of ocean campaign with that guidebook. I cannot impress upon people enough the importance of that guidebook. And keeping it up to date is an incredible endeavor, and it's a good thing to have because there's nothing like a sustained campaign, especially when it's an adventure campaign, up one coast and down the other. Because of course, I also used it for the Seattle to San Diego paddle, and some paddles even in between.
And also, while I've got you here for a sec, you are certainly not alone. Can you introduce your companion, who we are hearing more in the background?
Oh, the running commentary in the background, that is the floof, our little cockatiel.
Well, and pirates always had parrots, so a cockatiel seems right for our paddler. I know when I met you in 2007, you introduced me to Roz Savage, who was our other ocean explorer in our Blue Frontier Ocean Explorer project. Roz went on, like you had already done the East Coast, Roz had already paddled the Atlantic solo in her rowboat and decided Blue Frontier got to sponsor her as she paddled the other two of the three big ones, as they say, the Pacific and the Indian Ocean. And then we got you. Well, I mean, first we launched Roz with a Hawaiian band, and it was a big event. And then she got stuck offshore, and her rowboat capsized 3 times. She hit her head. She lost her sea anchor. The Coast Guard had to come in and rescue her. So in my book Rescue Warriors about the Coast Guard, I talk about how my environmental project was rescued by my book project. Roz was determined. She went back out with a salvage vessel, rescued her rowboat, and 6 months later, we sent her out again, only no band this time. It was at midnight under the Golden Gate, very quiet. And 110 days later, we met her with a camera crew in Hawaii, the first leg of her Pacific crossing. And Roz is, the classic English adventurer. I mean, she's now the first woman and the first British subject to row solo across the 3 big oceans of the world. I was equally impressed with you, Margo, because you call yourself a slow paddler, slow and constant. You did both coasts and the interior waters of the United States, and every evening after 40 or 50 miles of excruciating paddling, you'd pull up and network with a local seaweed group and make that connection and help them, and talk a little about how that worked out.
There is quite a big network of ocean lovers and just water lovers. And, the beautiful thing is when you have some press engagement, they really do seem to like to carry the story. And so that also helps connect with groups that want to come on board. And what was beautiful is that, you get to meet the local people, and you get to meet the very local organizations that are working on the issues that their specific locations are confronting right now, all along the coast. So it just became just a growing, it's a great way to amplify the voices of the folks that are on the ground doing the hard work. So they were they were also wonderful hosts too.
So after you paddled from Miami to Maine, did you think you were done when I asked you to paddle from Seattle to San Diego?
Yes, I did. I really didn't expect to keep going. And as you know, like NRDC also decided this would be a good thing to do to amplify voices for national ocean policy and et cetera. And so I was really happy actually to have excuses to not paddle Seattle to San Diego initially. And then I ran out of excuses, and there was no choice but to do that. And I'm really also glad that I didn't read your book about the coastal warriors until after the paddle, because ignorance is bliss. I knew the Columbia River mouth was going to be bad, but we waited for a good day, and there were some days where it was not good out, but I managed to muddle through.
You paddled through some of the roughest fetch of ocean in the world.
Yeah, that was an unforgettable paddle. That whole West Coast.
Legendary. One of these days, I do hope that you will write a book about that. So in the meantime, we've got the Blue Frontiers having lots of interactions with folks. You've got a new book out there, David. Did you want to talk about that? I believe in the meantime, in between some of these activities, you wrote 50 Ways to Save the Ocean.
I've had a chance to write several ocean books while we did our Blue Frontier ocean work. Definitely 50 Ways to Save the Ocean was a Blue Frontier project, It was illustrated by Jim Toomey, who was on our board at the time, the cartoonist who does the Sherman's Lagoon syndicated cartoon strip, Sherman being a not very bright but very lovable shark, and his wife Megan, the shark, and other characters, and with an introduction by Philippe Cousteau, the grandson of Jacques Cousteau, an adventurer in his own right and also a board member. And so 50 Ways to Save the Ocean was kind of a simple guide for everyday people on how everything you do every day affects the ocean around you, and how simple things you can do to protect the ocean will also help you in terms of your pocketbook, your health, your just sense of well-being. And so it had a great launch. I remember when we got from DC to the New York launch, we were all there, and there was a fourth grade class of students, and this little girl from Brooklyn raises her hand to say, "What is it?" She says, "Is that a real island, what you talk about?" I go, "What?" She says, "You know what Brooklyn and Queens is a part of." I explained that, yeah, Long Island was a real island. New York City is 80% disconnected from the mainland. And as we ran around the country, we made those connections. I think one of our stops was in Colorado, where you had just moved, Vicki. And
Right.
I was fairly amazed you were taking me to a dive shop, book talk. We got stuck behind a van with a llama in it. And then we got to the bookshop, and there were, 100 people waiting 5,000 feet above sea level.
Actually, it was a dive shop because you had already gone to the bookshop in Denver, so it was a dive shop here in Boulder. And yeah, you were amazed. Like, what are all of these people doing here, excited about oceans?
And I think that was the beginning of your thinking. You just moved to Boulder, and I think we made that connection then, which you went on to create the Colorado Ocean Coalition, which is today the Inland Ocean Coalition, because there was just this sense that it's all connected. And I think one of the 50 ways to save the ocean is talk to your cousin in Kansas about the ocean.
Absolutely. And that brings us to our third Blue Vision Summit in 2011. And I brought a large delegation in from Colorado at the time, because that was really who we were really focusing in on. And it was exciting because we were starting to get more engaged with our congressional leaders, we meaning Blue Frontiers and all of the people who participate. So I just remember the excitement of people going, "We're going to go visit and meet with our senator or our House of Representative," and really just that movement kept going forward. And then Wendy, you had the president of Costa Rica acknowledged in the Benchley Award, and she tell us a little about her.
Oh gosh, you know,
Laura Chinchilla.
yeah, Laura Chinchilla. She was just marvelous. I've actually stayed in touch with her. She's still deeply involved. Yeah. So I think that was one of the wonderful combinations, because when we would do a summit and have a Benchley Award in coordination, it was really the best of all worlds, because everybody coming in for the summit would have a chance to meet with some of the awardees at a reception, even if they didn't go to the award ceremony. It enabled us to have a whole variety of people there for the grassroots groups, people to see and to communicate with. So that was a lovely time when we could combine those two.
I think the high point in one sense was in those years after the summit and after the Benchley Awards, everybody would go up on Capitol Hill. We'd have our Healthy Ocean Hill Days. And Sam Farr, who was a ocean hero in Congress at the time, an ocean champion, said that this was really one of the only times that Congress got to sit down with their constituents and actually listen about the connections of ocean and public health and ocean and climate. And the fact that delegations from places like Colorado would come in on their own time and spend their own time to be there and talk to people made it a national issue. It was no longer just a coastal issue. It wasn't just Senator Whitehouse of the ocean state of Rhode Island. But now we've got to the point where, like, Joe Neguse of Colorado is an ocean champion, and people understand that every state's an ocean state. So those, Hill days were difficult, but they were also the high points for lots of people. People like scientists would come up to me, very smart people going, I didn't know I could meet with my congressperson. And it's like, it takes some planning, but they're working for you, and you have to let them know what it is that counts. So, I think what we've tried to do with Blue Frontier is everything that needs to be done, from celebrations of the sea because you protect what you love to these hill days and marches. I mean, in 2018, Margo, you paddled from New Jersey to DC when we launched a global march for the ocean. And it wasn't just 3,000 people in DC. It was youth-led protests in Ireland and Brazil and the Marshall Islands. And although that was a rough paddle, you said.
Yeah, that was. I'm really glad. I was kind of actually happy that people who I was trying to get join me, for the full paddle didn't, because some areas had changed, like the back bays. If you're paddling on the inside route, not the Chesapeake Bay, but the inside route on the east side of, the Delmarva Peninsula, there's one bay in particular, I'm blanking on the name, Matamkin it might be, that is almost completely filled in now at low tide. And I didn't realize that until until I was in there, and I'm literally crawling through the muck with my canoe in reverse so I could kind of throw it forward a little bit without the rudder getting stuck in the mud, because you couldn't drag it because the rudder would get stuck in the mud. So I'm crawling with my canoe, and it was just it was rather nightmarish, and there were storm clouds on the horizon, and I was not thinking happy thoughts at all. But that was one of the rough spots, and that was actually it was pretty minimal for the most part. It was a 2-week paddle or a little less.
You made it in time that you were on the Anacostia the night that all the youth were making banners and planning for the big march. And the next day, people were there for the rally, an interesting array of speakers, youths, and also like Captain Paul Watson of Sea Shepherd and Ralph Nader and Carl Safina and Sylvia Earle, her deepness, of course. Wendy, you were there. I think, Vicki, you had a big contingent of people from all over the country. The Inland Ocean Coalition marched at the front, and it continued. I mean, there were more marches the following year in 2019, 2,000 people marching in Paris, led by women dressed as mermaids. And I was there dressed as a crab on Coney Island, my natal waters, youth march organized by the New York Aquarium. And then, of course, it all went in abeyance with much else in the world in 2020 with the COVID. In fact, our local Blue Frontier project here in Richmond, California, to save a headland, we had defeated a mega casino on this headland, this beautiful natural wonder, in 2010. The city had voted 58 to 42% against developing this. And but because it's a low-income community of color, Richmond, California, instead of acknowledging the need for a community park, they tried to resell it as a housing development. We're going to take it to another initiative for the city to vote on. And in March of 2020, we had 40 petition collectors. We were going to collect 10,000 signatures door to door and try and win this coastal park for the community, and everything shut down. And so I think the world changed.
So you're talking about Point Malati in California. And I just want to, for our listeners, and we did a podcast on that, 5 or 6 back. So if anyone is interested, they can go and learn all about the history of the fight, how the land is being protected now, and how important that area is for preservation. But yeah, that's been one of your big projects at Point Malati. And
because the local is national and global. I remember when we were young, Wendy and I, the saying at the first Earth Day was, think globally, act locally. But today, the crisis of ocean and climate is such that we have to think and act locally, regionally, globally, simultaneously. And it's a challenge for a small organization, but we try and live up to it.
Yeah, well, you've been doing a lot of different things, and well, actually, I think since we're talking about podcasts, you launched the Rising Tide Ocean podcast in 2019, and now we are in our 50s, which I love, and I joined you about a year ago as your co-host. So that's been really exciting. And then just going back, talking about the inland, we did a collaborative project with Inland Ocean Coalition and Blue Frontiers to put together the Inland Ocean Summit in Texas, along with EarthX. And that was really an opportunity to kind of go back and utilize that directory that you put together, and utilize people inland and around the Texas area to bring that message to all about how very, very important it is. So you've also, at that particular time, did a communications workshop. So tell us about that initiative and how that fit into the Inland Ocean Summit.
Well, we did a media training workshop for some of the people that you and we helped bring together. Um, because of my background, 30 years as a freelance journalist and working with Ellie Curlo, one of our volunteers who's a professional award-winning public relations person. We bring in local journalists, we bring in videographers, and try and train people how to communicate with journalists, how to do their own social media, how to turn their campaigns or scientists' data into stories and the importance of storytelling and sort of training people to do good media. It's part of what Blue Frontier calls its Blue Beat project, the idea that the only resource not fully exploited in the oceans is good storytelling. And so, and so we had a Blue Notes, 250,000 words later, we transitioned from Blue Notes to the podcast, the Rising Tide podcast that we now co-host. We do the media trainings. We've done it from scientists at the International Union for the Conservation of Nature to youth activists in various venues, including through Earth Echo. We just think that media is really important. Blue Frontier has produced in its 20 years over 350 articles and opinion pieces from the New York Times to specialized magazines like Surfer or Alert Diver to political outlets like The Hill, because communications is a part of it. It's like how to get the grassroots communicating the messages. We have so many solutions at the grassroots level that the challenge, as one of our Benchley Award winners once put it, is to scale up the solutions faster than the problems. And my last book, The Golden Shore, California's Love Affair with the Sea, was about, I realized where I live, California. We've got 40 million people, the world's fifth largest economy, and we're doing really well by our coast and ocean because there's that sense of entitlement. Every Californian understands the ocean belongs to them. And we look for those models, both small and global models of how to do better. Our most recent effort of the last 3 years is this Ocean Climate Action Plan, which started also, as you said, in Vicki in 2019. A lot of progressive politicians came out with a Green New Deal for climate, which was great, except there's no blue in this Green New Deal. So Blue Frontier partnered with the Center for the Blue Economy at Middlebury's Institute for International Studies down in Monterey. And we began building the kind of coalitions that we've always tried to put together of frontline communities, national leaders. We had a first conference in Monterey in 2019, and in 2020 we had a final Ocean Climate Action Plan, which talked about different areas where ocean can provide solutions to the climate challenge, from greening ports and shipping to sustainable aquaculture to offshore wind and clean energy, transitioning off offshore oil. And with a lot of support from figures like John Kerry and Leon Panetta, and who were both past Benchley winners, as well as Robert Bullard, who's like considered the father of the environmental justice movement, Sylvia Earle, of course. And we built a coalition, and in the last 2 years, we were able to influence. Our Ocean Climate Action Plan was a template, but much of it ended up in the Congress's Ocean-Based Climate Solutions Act, we advocated for 10 billion for coastal restoration, 4 billion for greening ports and shipping, which ended up in the Build Back Better bill, the national effort by the Democrats to address climate, and it included $11 billion that we'd been advocating for, Blue Frontier and its partners, 11 billion for protecting our coast and oceans and building a coastal core, a climate core of young people to engage in that restoration, and greening our ports and shipping, which is largely started and inspired by one of our Benchley winners, Geraldine Natz, when she was the director of the Port of LA. And unfortunately, in this last year, it kind of got frozen, opposition by two corporate Democrats in the Senate. But you can't give up. We know what the solutions are. We need to keep working to create the political will to enact them. And that's 20 years on. That's what Blue Frontier is still dedicated to.
I want to jump in here too, because part of the Ocean Climate Action Plan, or OCAP, was really about getting people involved. And I think all of us on this call today were involved in that OCAP Hill Day, where we had over 300 people from 30 states and territories meet with 150 members of House members and their staffs and 33 Senate offices to talk about this Ocean-Based Climate Solutions Act, Coastal Barriers Resource Act, and all of the things that you were talking about. And I think having citizens, community members really engage on this topic around this OCAP priority was significant. So just give me your input or your thought about that, because you were very involved in organizing this.
May I just quickly say that I just thought that was an absolutely important, grand effort. Those 2 years were really well done. I thought it was well organized. And I just thought it was very powerful, David. Bravo to you.
And to all of us. I mean, Senator Merkley of Oregon said that he made a very nice comment. He said that, the only way legislation ever gets done is if it's an outside-inside effort, if you have the outside pressure to get the politicians to listen, and we were that outside pressure. Deb Haaland, when she was a congresswoman before she became the first Indigenous Secretary of Interior, said that wherever you live, the ocean's got to be part of your life, and that's why she had used Ocean Climate Action Plan integrated in some of the legislation she'd introduced. And so I think we're making the ocean real, that that there's some blue in the red, white, and blue. And I think that it's frustrating to see years of effort frozen when, a coal millionaire out of West Virginia doesn't like the idea of taking climate action, which is what happened. But you have to link it. We're continuing our job, which is educating elected officials, educating potential candidates on why the ocean is important for the jobs, the livelihoods, the survival, not only of coastal people, but of all people on our blue planet. And I think we also continue to do it with celebrations and with fun events. I mean, our seaweed happy hours that we used to have at the Reef Bar in DC became blue drinks nationally. I always used to say, if you're going to be part of the ocean movement, maybe you want to drink like a fish now and then. You do it with joy because you protect what you love. And 20 years into it, I think that we've built a network of people like y'all who just realize that if we school together, we're facing growing crisis. I mean, the cascading disasters are real, and our oceans are at risk like never before. But you can't give up. We don't know if we're going to win. All we know is if we don't try, we lose. And our ocean is just too fun and sacred and important to risk losing.
Well, you sure said that well. And I think all of us on this call today totally believe that. We have a few minutes, so I just wanted to go to Margo and Wendy. You've been involved with Blue Frontier for practically the entire 20 years of its existence. Margo, why don't you go first? What are some of your visions and hopes for the organization as we move into the future?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
While Margo works on her sound system, these are so frustrating sometimes, these conversations, but at least we've got this way of communicating through 2 years of COVID. So I mean, I hope that Blue Frontier just continues with what they did with OCAP, because continuing to bring the blue into the climate conversation is just absolutely vital. And not only that, lobbying Congress, but also I would love it if we could do another summit. I just think that they were so exciting, and I know it's a lot of effort, but especially now that we're able to get out and about, I would hope we could bring everybody together again to Washington and have some speakers and do some lobbying on the Hill in person. It inspires people, and so thank you, David, for making it happen. And I hope you just keep making it happen again and again and again. It's been a great 20 years, David, and I'm glad that I've been part of it, and that Peter was part of it for quite a few years. So thank you.
What I think I'm hearing you say in the beginning is what are my thoughts for the future of Blue Frontier and what I'd like to see more of. I really do think it is such a powerful thing to unite the grassroots groups so they can trade what works, what doesn't, to keep that network strong. Because relationships really are so important, and especially and here's a specific, folks in Alabama where everything is an uphill battle, and they're not really helped a whole lot by their federal, the guys in Congress or the senators. But when you can start empowering the people on the ground to put pressure on those folks, you can be quite intractable. Things do start to happen. And so that is that connection with the grassroots from all over, either coast, Gulf Coast, and the middle, getting those folks who understand that water ocean connection and who are working on similar projects, even in the heartland. I think it's such a powerful movement, and to keep going, that it is unstoppable. I mean, one thing I've said over and over again about the people I've met on the ground, holy heck, if we could get campaigns for elected officials to focus on water and the ocean, that those two things have the biggest fan group. And any politician who latches on clean water, clean, healthy ocean is and makes that a central part of their campaign. You can't find anyone who will say, "Hey, I'm all for dirty water," or "I'm all for a sick ocean." People get it.
And Vicki, let me ask you, other than making Rising Tide one of the most popular podcasts in America, what's your vision for Blue Frontier's future?
I think that Blue Frontier has a phenomenal potential to grow. I agree with Wendy by having these summits, bringing people from around the country, working together, reaching out to political leaders, and then also being a champion for the ocean as a solution to climate change is absolutely critical. I think people are just starting to wake up to the issue that, wow, ocean acidification, overfishing, the need for marine protected areas, people are starting to get it. So we just need more and more people throughout our country and throughout the world to really pick up the flag, the banner, and really work towards ocean protection. And I think Blue Frontier has an ability to engage people on a number of levels. So I just want to see it grow, and I'm really delighted to be part of it. And I hope I can stay part of it for the next 20
absolutely.
years.
The ocean is rising, but so are we.
Oh my gosh, you bet. And David, what is your vision? You kind of summarized it a bit, but just maybe in a sentence before we wrap up.
My vision is to see Blue Frontier grow to where it's got the capacity to turn the tide. We're like the Coast Guard that I wrote about. We do a lot with a little. I'd like to see us have enough people who can work with us, be engaged, be part of the actual organization, that we take on a role of what we've always had, which is building a movement, a fair and equitable movement that connects all the frontline communities, with all the policymakers, and that everybody gets it from bottom up and top down, that, as Sylvia says, no blue, no green. Without a healthy ocean, we have no healthy economy, we have no healthy way of life. And with it, anything's possible.
That's beautiful. With that, I want to thank you, Margo and Wendy, for joining us on the Rising Tide Ocean podcast. David, thank you for your 20 years of leadership. Looking forward to many, many more. And everybody have a fantastic oceany day, no matter where you are. Rising Tide is a production of Blue Frontier, co-hosted by David Helvarg and myself, Vicki Nichols-Goldstein, with support from Natasha Benjamin and Ellie Curlow. Rising Tide's editing services and additional technical support are provided by Studio Cape May. The theme song is written and performed by Ethan Kenbard. You can find Rising Tide, the Ocean Podcast, at www.bluefront.org or download it from Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Off in the salty ocean, off where the waves roll free. The sparkling water rises, then crashes to the sea. Out amongst the breakers, you'll have no need to fear. It's true, it's the blue frontier. Off in the salty ocean, off to the blue frontier.
Sparky, come here, buddy. Sparky! There you are. Good boy, Sparky.